There's a hidden wisdom inside every wound, reflection so powerful that most people spend their entire lives avoiding it. When someone hurts you, it's natural to feel the surge of anger, the sting of betrayal, the ache of being misunderstood or devalued. Yet beyond the emotional chaos lies something deep as a mirror. Pain reflects not just what others have done to you, but what still lives within you. The unhealed parts, the silent insecurities, the fragments of your own shadow that long for integration. Pain shows you what still has power over you. If another's words can crush you, if rejection can define your worth, if betrayal can shatter your peace, then pain is not just coming from them, it is revealing something within you that still believes in their power. The outer wound only activates the inner one. You think they hurt you, but in truth, they revealed where you were still wounded. Pain becomes the most honest reflection of your inner state, the mirror you can't lie to. But most people don't look into that mirror. They use pain as a weapon. They want to strike back, to show the other person how much they've damaged them, to make them pay. Yet, in doing so, they become trapped in the very energy that wounded them. When you weaponize pain, you stay enslaved by it. You live through it, speak from it, act under its influence. You mirror your wound instead of healing it. Retaliation may feel powerful for a moment, but it reinforces the illusion that your pain came from outside you, when in truth it is born from within. To understand pain as a mirror requires brutal honesty. It asks you to stop pointing outward and start looking inward. Ask yourself, what part of me was triggered by this experience? Why did this person's behavior cut so deeply? Why does this situation feel so familiar? Often, you'll find that the pain doesn't begin with them. It begins with something much older. A forgotten childhood memory. A voice that once told you you weren't enough. A past rejection that taught you to fear abandonment. Pain reopens the doors to the rooms of your psyche that you've kept locked for too long. Looking into the mirror of pain is uncomfortable. It strips away illusions. It forces you to see not just the wound, but the story you built around it, the story of victimhood, of blame, of self-pity. You begin to see how much energy you've poured into proving your pain instead of transforming it. Healing doesn't come from being right about your suffering. It comes from being conscious of it. Awareness is the first act of liberation. When you stop using pain as a weapon, you begin to understand its sacred purpose. Pain isn't punishment. It's information. It tells you where your boundaries are weak, where your self-worth has been outsourced, where your inner world needs tending. Pain invites you to reclaim the parts of yourself that you gave away for acceptance, validation, or love. The more you listen to its message, the less you need to project it onto others. Those who hurt you are mirrors too. They reflect back your own unintegrated shadow, the qualities you deny in yourself. If someone's arrogance enrages you, perhaps it's because you've disowned your own assertiveness. If their manipulation wounds you, perhaps it's because you've silenced your own power. The people who trigger you most are often the ones who carry the lessons your soul is ready to learn. The mind calls them enemies, but the soul recognizes them as teachers. To see pain this way doesn't mean you excuse cruelty or accept mistreatment. It means you understand its deeper purpose. You can set boundaries without hate. You can walk away without revenge. You can grieve without becoming bitter. Because when you start seeing pain as a mirror, you realize that every encounter, even the painful ones, exists to bring you closer to your truth. Healing begins when you stop asking, why did they do this to me? And start asking, what is this showing me about myself? That shift changes everything. Suddenly, pain is not an obstacle, but a guide. It points to where you need to grow, where you need to let go, where you need to forgive. Not to free them, but to free yourself. Forgiveness is not about approval, it's about release. It's the moment you stop carrying the poison they handed you and start nurturing the parts of you that were abandoned in the process. Every time you respond to pain with awareness, you alchemize it into wisdom. The same energy that could have become bitterness transforms into strength, clarity, and compassion. You begin to see that pain was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to awaken you. You stop asking for revenge and start seeking understanding. You stop trying to prove your worth to others and begin to embody it from within. The mirror of pain doesn't lie, but it does liberate. It reveals the patterns that keep repeating in your life. The same types of people, the same conflicts, the same disappointments, all echoing the same inner wound that longs to be seen. When you finally face it with consciousness instead of resentment, the pattern dissolves. You no longer attract the same pain because you've learned its lesson. And so, the next time someone hurts you, pause before reacting. Instead of asking how to hurt them back, ask what this pain is trying to teach you. Look into the mirror without judgment. The reflection may sting, but within that reflection lies your evolution. Pain becomes your greatest teacher when you stop fighting it and start listening. The mirror never lies, and within it, you will find not the face of your enemy, but the image of the self still waiting to be healed. There is a moment in every conflict where you realize that the real war is not between you and them. It is between your higher self and your reactions. The world constantly invites you to fight, to prove, to defend. But every time you accept the invitation, you step into a battlefield that drains your energy and blinds your awareness. The ones who provoke you know this truth unconsciously. As long as you are reacting, you are not growing. As long as you are fighting, you are not healing. Transcendence begins the moment you stop playing their game. When someone wounds your pride, dismisses your worth, or manipulates your emotions, the ego demands a response. It wants to fight back, to expose, to humiliate, to make them feel what you felt. But that is exactly how the battlefield traps you. It feeds on your reaction. Retaliation feels like power in the moment, but it keeps you in the same vibration as the one who harmed you. You mirror their chaos and become part of it. The more you argue with darkness, the more you become shaped by it. True strength lies not in defeating your enemy, but in becoming immune to their influence. The battlefield is not made of swords and shields, it is made of triggers. Every word, every look, every gesture that stirs anger within you is a weapon meant to test your mastery. When you respond unconsciously, you confirm that your peace can still be stolen. When you stay centered, you declare sovereignty over yourself. The highest form of power is self-control, not the control of others, but the control of your inner state when everything around you demands reaction. Transcending the battlefield doesn't mean surrendering to injustice or pretending you're unaffected. It means shifting the ground on which you fight. You no longer fight for dominance, approval, or validation. You fight for awareness. You stop trying to win arguments and start protecting your energy. You stop trying to prove your worth and start embodying it silently. Detachment becomes your shield, and silence becomes your sword. There is a sacred dignity in not responding to provocation. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've risen above the need to prove your power through conflict. People who live unconsciously thrive on emotional reactions. They pull you into drama because it validates their existence. They need chaos to feel alive. When you withdraw your energy, when you stop feeding the battle, you strip them of that power. You become the calm they can't infect. The battlefield dissolves not because you won, but because you refused to participate. In that refusal lies mastery. The quiet kind that intimidates without aggression, that transforms without confrontation. To transcend the battlefield is to understand that not every attack deserves your attention. Silence, when rooted in awareness, is not avoidance, it's ascension. When you stop engaging with every insult or manipulation, you begin to see how much of life's noise was simply bait for your energy. Every conflict that once seemed personal reveals itself as impersonal, a projection of another's inner war. People project their pain, their fear, their insecurity onto those who mirror their weakness. If you fight back, you validate their illusion. If you rise above it, you expose it. Every human relationship becomes a test of your inner evolution. Those who challenge you the most are often placed in your path to help you recognize your own triggers. When someone disrespects you and you respond with grace, you have already won a battle greater than any verbal victory. You have proven to yourself that your peace is no longer negotiable. That is transcendence, not fleeing from conflict, but moving through it with consciousness. The ego loves the battlefield because it feeds on comparison. It wants to be right, to be superior, to have the last word, but awareness sees through the illusion. It knows that every time you argue with a fool, you step into foolishness yourself. Every time you defend your truth to someone unwilling to listen, you hand them control over your peace. The wise withdraw not because they fear losing, but because they recognize that there was never anything to win. The more conscious you become, the fewer battles you fight. You begin to choose your silence carefully, not out of cowardice, but out of clarity. You realize that peace is not found after the fight. It is found in refusing the fight altogether. You stop seeking revenge and start seeking understanding. You no longer wish to destroy your enemies. You simply outgrow them. You rise to a level of awareness where their behavior no longer surprises you because you see it as a reflection of their own inner turmoil. To transcend the battlefield is to shift from reaction to observation. Instead of asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" you begin asking, "What part of me is still reacting?" You move from blame to insight. You begin to notice how much of your energy was spent trying to control what others think, say, or do. You reclaim that energy and redirect it toward your growth. Every time you choose not to react, you strengthen your inner foundation. Every time you remain calm in the face of chaos, you expand your awareness. Eventually, you realize that the true enemy was never the person who hurt you. It was the unconscious part of you that kept entering battles just to feel significant. When you stop identifying with that part, the battlefield dissolves. You no longer see others as threats, but as mirrors of consciousness. You learn to observe without absorbing, to listen without defending, to walk away without resentment. The mind wants to fight, the soul wants to understand. The moment you start listening to the soul, the war ends within you, even if the noise outside continues. The battlefield exists only as long as you feed it with your energy. When you rise above the need to win, prove, or retaliate, you step into a higher frequency of existence. The same situations may appear, but they no longer touch you the same way. You move differently, speak differently, think differently. You are no longer the warrior seeking victory. You are the observer standing in stillness while the world burns around you, untouched, aware, free. There comes a point when you must realize that not everyone's version of you deserves a response. People will build stories around your silence, twist your intentions, and assign meanings to your actions that have nothing to do with who you really are. This is how projection works. Those who cannot face their own reflection will try to rewrite yours. They will distort your truth until it fits the limits of their understanding. The more you try to correct their story, the more you become trapped inside it. Detachment is the act of stepping out of the story entirely. The human mind craves control. When others misrepresent us, the ego rises in defense. It wants to argue, to explain, to make them see who we are. But this impulse is how you get pulled into their narrative. The more you fight for your truth in their world, the more power you give to their version of you. You cannot awaken someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. You cannot find peace by trying to convince those who need you to be the villain in their story. Detachment is not indifference. It is freedom from illusion. When someone decides who you are, it has little to do with truth and everything to do with their perception. People see you through the lens of their own wounds. A kind act may threaten the one who has built their identity around cynicism. Your honesty may offend the one who survives through manipulation. Your strength may trigger the one who depends on weakness for validation. Their reaction to you is rarely about you. It is about the mirror you hold up to them. Detaching from their narrative means understanding this dynamic so deeply that you no longer internalize their projections as your identity. The moment you stop defending yourself to those who twist your intentions, you reclaim your energy. Every word of explanation is a seed planted in their soil. The more you speak, the deeper your roots sink into a world that doesn't belong to you. Detachment means uprooting yourself from that soil and returning to your own. It means letting people think what they need to think so that you can remain centered in your truth. Not everyone deserves access to your clarity, especially those who feed on your confusion. The ego thrives on being understood, but the soul thrives on peace. When you detach from their narrative, you trade the need for validation for the power of silence. Silence is not weakness. It's the recognition that your truth doesn't require witnesses to remain real. When you know who you are, other stories become background noise. Their gossip, assumptions, and judgments lose weight because you no longer carry them. You don't need to erase their illusion, you simply stop living inside it. Detachment is a radical act of self-respect. It's the refusal to shrink yourself into the version of you that others created. It's walking away from manipulation, emotional guilt, and psychological warfare without needing to win. The person who detaches is not cold, they are clear. They no longer chase closure from those who profit from keeping the wound open. They no longer argue with the blind about what they see. They simply withdraw their energy and redirect it toward creation, healing, and purpose. When you detach, the stories others tell about you will still circulate, but they will no longer shape you. The truth doesn't need to be defended, it just needs to be lived. The world will always have its storytellers. Some will tell stories to heal, others to harm. Your task is not to silence them, but to stop being written by them. You are the author of your consciousness, and no one else deserves the pen. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop giving others permission to define your meaning. Detaching from their narrative also means releasing the emotional hooks they planted in you. Every accusation, every lie, every misrepresentation carries emotional weight only if you carry it. The moment you choose not to absorb it, it returns to its source. People who rely on manipulation lose power when their targets stop reacting. The silence they once mocked becomes the boundary they cannot cross. This is how detachment transforms you, not through resistance, but through refusal. You begin to see that every false story about you reveals more about them than it does about you. The liar exposes their fear of truth. The gossiper reveals their hunger for relevance. The manipulator exposes their emptiness. When you observe instead of react, you see patterns instead of people. You see wounded egos trying to protect themselves by projecting their wounds onto you. The awareness of this truth makes you immune. You no longer respond with anger, only understanding. People will always tell stories. That's how they make sense of the world. The problem begins when you start living according to their script. You stop acting from authenticity and start performing for acceptance. You edit your emotions, censor your intuition, and become a character in someone else's drama. Detachment is the return to authenticity. It's the moment you stop performing and start existing again, you realize that peace is found not in being liked or understood, but in being real. When you detach from their narrative, you no longer chase fairness from the unfair. You stop expecting closure from the ones who broke you. You stop pleading for clarity from those who thrive in confusion. Instead, you reclaim the energy once spent on justification and channel it into creation. You create meaning from your pain. You create stillness from chaos. You create growth from rejection. Every ounce of energy you once gave to defending yourself becomes fuel for self-evolution. Detachment is not the absence of care. It is the presence of perspective. You can love people deeply and still refuse to live under their illusion. You can wish them well and still walk away. You can understand their pain without allowing it to define your path. Detachment allows compassion without entanglement. It allows forgiveness without returning to the fire. It is a calm withdrawal from the emotional battlefield where only illusions win. Once you begin to see the pattern, you stop needing to fix it. You stop trying to make everyone see your truth and start focusing on living it. Those meant to understand will feel your energy without explanation. Those committed to distortion will eventually drown in their own noise. You are no longer fighting for your identity. You are embodying it. Detachment turns misunderstanding into background music. It no longer dictates your rhythm. To detach from their narrative is to finally belong to yourself again. It is the quiet revolution of choosing inner truth over outer approval. It is the sacred act of saying, I no longer live in the stories told about me. I live in the truth that exists beyond them. There comes a stage in your healing where revenge no longer excites you, where the need to be seen, validated, or vindicated begins to dissolve. The people who hurt you, betrayed you, or dismissed you slowly lose the power to define your emotional landscape. Not because they apologized, not because they changed, but because you evolved beyond the frequency where their existence matters. Growth, when it is real, doesn't shout back at the past. It simply outgrows it. Evolution is the quiet erasure of their relevance. In the beginning, pain keeps you tied to them. The mind replays what they said, what they did, and what you wish you could have said in return. The ego craves the last word. It wants recognition, acknowledgement, closure, but none of that comes from them. It comes from your evolution. The moment you start focusing on your healing instead of their punishment, you start pulling your energy out of their grasp. Every step toward awareness weakens the invisible thread that binds you to their memory. You evolve when you stop asking why they hurt you and start asking what it taught you. Pain, betrayal, and rejection are brutal teachers, but they are teachers nonetheless. Every person who wounded you brought you closer to seeing the parts of yourself that were still dependent on external validation. Their absence forces you to meet yourself. Their silence pushes you toward self-reliance. What once felt like abandonment becomes initiation. Through this lens, the pain becomes sacred. It breaks you open so you can grow from within instead of reaching outward for affirmation. The ones who hurt you wanted you to stay trapped in reaction. They fed on your confusion, your explanations, your endless attempts to be understood. They wanted you to keep circling the same emotional ground because as long as you were reacting, they remained relevant. But evolution happens in silence. The day you stop responding, explaining, or proving, you shift the power dynamic. You no longer orbit around their energy. You become the center of your own universe again. Evolving beyond them doesn't mean pretending the pain never existed. It means seeing it clearly without letting it define you. You can acknowledge what they did and still refuse to live as a victim of it. You can grieve and still grow. Healing is not about erasing memory, it's about removing its emotional grip. Their name will cross your mind one day, and instead of pain, you'll feel neutrality. That neutrality is proof that you've transcended the lesson. What used to make your heart race will barely move you, not because you've forgotten, but because you've evolved. When you evolve, you begin to see that people who hurt you were operating from their own unconsciousness. Their behavior wasn't personal. It was an expression of their inner wounds. Their betrayal reflected their fear. Their cruelty revealed their emptiness. You start to see them not as villains, but as unhealed beings acting out their pain. Compassion replaces resentment, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Compassion frees you from the bitterness that keeps you bound to them. Every level of evolution demands a release. You can't move into higher awareness while holding on to old stories. You can't carry their shadow into your new light. So life will keep testing you with memories, with echoes, with reminders, until you can look at it all and feel nothing but peace. That is when you've truly evolved. When the person who once dominated your thoughts now feels like a distant stranger, you'll understand that growth is not loud or dramatic. It's subtle, almost invisible. It happens quietly, beneath the surface, until one day you wake up and realize you're free. The greatest transformation happens when you stop trying to fix others and start refining yourself. Every ounce of energy once spent trying to change them can be redirected into mastering your emotions, deepening your purpose, and nurturing your inner peace. The more you evolve, the more their energy becomes incompatible with yours. You stop resonating with their frequency. You can be in the same room and still feel miles apart, because evolution shifts your vibration beyond their reach. Evolving until they become irrelevant is not arrogance, it's alignment. You are no longer playing roles in their drama. You are no longer emotionally available for their manipulation. You become invisible to the old energy patterns that once held you. This invisibility isn't about hiding, it's about transcending. You stop existing in the version of reality where they have power over you. That's why they often try to provoke you again. Not because they care, but because they sense they are losing access to your energy. Growth confuses those who stay stagnant. They call you distant, selfish, or cold because they no longer recognize the version of you that tolerated their behavior. But evolution requires boundaries. It requires the courage to detach, to walk away, and to stay away even when the old energy tries to pull you back. You stop chasing closure and start creating peace. You stop explaining your worth and start living it. Every moment you choose peace over reaction, you accelerate your evolution. There's a kind of revenge that doesn't destroy, it dissolves. When you evolve, you make their influence irrelevant. The person who once caused you sleepless nights now barely crosses your mind. The story that once defined your pain becomes a paragraph in a much larger narrative of transformation. The universe has a way of balancing things without your interference. You don't need to seek justice when your growth becomes its own proof. Their relevance fades as your consciousness expands. Evolving beyond them also means taking accountability for your own patterns. You begin to see how you allowed, ignored, or normalized certain behaviors out of fear or attachment. You learn the difference between love and dependency, empathy and self-abandonment, forgiveness and enabling. You stop romanticizing pain and start honoring peace. What once attracted you no longer interests you. The chaos that once felt exciting now feels heavy. You begin craving stillness, honesty, and depth. That craving is evolution reshaping your desires. Evolution is not a single moment of awakening. It's a process of outgrowing illusions. You outgrow the need for validation. You outgrow the desire to prove your innocence. You outgrow the fantasy that people will eventually see your worth. They don't need to. You see it now. And once you see it, their opinions, judgments, and narratives lose meaning. The noise fades, the emotion dissolves, and what remains is awareness, calm, quiet, unbothered awareness that no longer revolves around their existence. You stop looking back to check if they're watching. You stop wondering if they regret what they did. You stop needing them to acknowledge your evolution because your life itself becomes the proof. Every choice, every boundary, every act of self-respect becomes a declaration of your growth. The irony is that those who once underestimated you are now forced to face the truth through your transformation. Not because you told them, but because your evolution made their version of you obsolete. The most powerful response to betrayal, cruelty, or injustice is not revenge, it is transformation. Retaliation may satisfy the ego for a fleeting moment, but it leaves the soul untouched, unchanged, and still chained to the very pain it seeks to overcome. Transformation, on the other hand, turns that same pain into wisdom, resilience, and clarity. The difference between retaliation and transformation is the difference between reaction and evolution. One keeps you in the same vibration as your oppressor, the other elevates you beyond it. When someone wounds you, your first instinct is to strike back. The mind wants justice, the heart wants balance, and the ego wants validation. But what retaliation truly gives you is repetition. Every act of revenge repeats the original wound in a different form. It may seem like control, but it is still enslavement. You are still reacting to the person who hurt you. Your energy is still orbiting around them. You may feel powerful, but your power is borrowed from the same darkness that tried to destroy you. Transformation begins only when you realize that you no longer want to participate in that cycle. Transformation requires stillness. Before you act, before you speak, before you decide, you must pause and ask, what do I actually want to create from this pain? Revenge creates more pain. Awareness creates growth. If you use your suffering consciously, it becomes fuel for rebirth. Every heartbreak, betrayal, or disappointment carries the potential to reintroduce you to yourself. Pain strips away illusions about others and about yourself. It shows you what still controls you, what triggers you, and what needs to be released. Transformation is not about getting even, it's about getting free. The urge to retaliate comes from the ego's fear of powerlessness. You want to prove that they didn't win, that you still have control. But true power doesn't come from reacting, it comes from choosing differently. The one who transforms is not weaker than the one who fights back. They are wiser, because transformation demands more courage than retaliation ever could. It takes strength to stay conscious in the middle of your pain, to resist the impulse to mirror the very energy that wounded you. It's easy to destroy. It's difficult to rebuild yourself into someone who cannot be destroyed the same way again. Transformation begins with acceptance. Not passive acceptance, but conscious acknowledgement of what happened without denial or distortion. You face the truth, the pain, the betrayal, the loss, and you allow it to teach you. The more you resist pain, the longer it owns you. When you face it with awareness, it becomes a doorway to depth. You begin to understand that the people who hurt you were acting from their own unconsciousness. Their cruelty was not power, it was blindness. Their manipulation was not strength, it was fear. Once you see this, your anger loses its grip. You stop needing to punish them because you realize they are already living inside the prison of their own ignorance. Transformation turns pain into purpose. It teaches you how to use suffering as a sculptor, carving strength where there was once weakness, clarity where there was once confusion, compassion where there was once resentment. Instead of asking, how do I hurt them back? You start asking, what can I build from this? Every wound becomes a source of insight. Every loss becomes a lesson in detachment. Every rejection becomes redirection. The more you transmute pain, the less you crave revenge. You understand that what you create from the experience is far more powerful than what you could destroy because of it. Retaliation operates in the realm of the external. It depends on what the other person does or feels. Transformation happens internally. It depends only on you. When you choose transformation, you take your power back completely because you no longer need them to suffer for you to heal. You realize that their downfall isn't your liberation, your awakening is. You can walk away with grace instead of vengeance, because you understand that your peace is too precious to be spent on punishment. The more you transform, the more you realize that life has an inherent justice built into it. Every action carries its own consequence. Those who inflict pain without awareness are destined to experience the same energy they create. You don't need to be their karma. Life already is. Your role is to evolve, to rise, to grow so completely that their energy cannot coexist with yours anymore. The universe has a way of handling those who harm others, not always immediately, but inevitably. Transformation allows you to trust that process instead of trying to control it. There is a quiet power in refusing to retaliate. It confuses those who expected you to break. They feed on conflict, and when you stop feeding them, they starve. They wanted your reaction, you gave them your silence. They wanted your anger, you gave them your absence. That is transformation, the conscious decision to turn pain into poise. The person who once triggered your rage now becomes irrelevant to your state of being. They no longer dictate your emotions because you've transcended the level where they operate. Transformation also means forgiving, not for them, but for yourself. Forgiveness is the final stage of alchemy, where pain loses its story and becomes wisdom. To forgive doesn't mean you excuse their behavior. It means you refuse to carry their poison any longer. You stop drinking from the cup they handed you. You begin to realize that forgiveness is not a gift to them. It is a declaration of your freedom. The more you evolve, the more you see that revenge is a poor substitute for peace. Every time you transform instead of retaliate, you teach the world what strength truly looks like. You become an embodiment of resilience, not because you never broke, but because you turned your breaking into awakening. You carry scars not as reminders of what they did, but as evidence of what you overcame. Your life becomes a quiet testament to the fact that transformation is the highest form of victory. The fire that was meant to destroy you becomes the same fire that forges your strength. Transformation is the rebellion of the soul against unconscious living. It's the moment you refuse to let pain define your identity. Retaliation keeps you trapped in the same old narrative, the endless cycle of blame, anger, and suffering. A transformation writes a new story, one where your peace is not dependent on anyone else's destruction. The ultimate triumph is not in proving them wrong, but in becoming so right within yourself that they no longer exist as a reference point for your growth.